We are going to start our Skyslope Forms demonstration here. And I always like to start in Skyslope because I want to point out a couple of things. One, I know my dashboard looks different than yours. The staff, we still have the old classic view, as I call it, in Skyslope. But when you see these Skyslope Forms shortcuts, if you are in your Skyslope dashboard, and I do know the agent side has, write an offer, create a buyer agreement, those things are shortcuts to Skyslope Forms, but they can be a little tricky. I don't recommend you use them until you are very well versed in using Skyslope Forms. Then you want to give it a shot, that's fine. But I think it confuses the file setup portion of it. And I also want to point out that if you create a file in Skyslope Forms, that is not a Skyslope file. You still have to come back to Skyslope and create your file. But you can go between the different Skyslope platforms by going up to the apps button at the top right. And you can see that you can go to Forms or DigiSign. And then when you're in Forms, you can go back to Skyslope the same way. Forms is built on top of the DigiSign chassis. So in the end, your files are being sent for signature through DigiSign, but there's a lot of other features that DigiSign does not have. It's much more three-dimensional. So when you see DigiSign within Skyslope Forms, don't get confused. It will say it's coming from DigiSign when you send documents for signature. But if you go to DigiSign, you will not find those files if you sent them from Skyslope Forms. Skyslope Forms is sort of a plumped up version of DigiSign, and they don't share files. They are separate. But when you get to the sending, the actual e-signing platform part, it will indicate that it's coming from DigiSign. So if you've never been in Skyslope Forms, you want to start by going up under your name and going to two things, just to double check. In user profile, you can see your information. You should see under professional information, the state of Illinois. If you operate in more than one state, you can add another location. That will allow you to get access to more than one state's templates and documents. Okay, so if you're struggling at all and you're like, hey, I can't get to the eXp Illinois library, or I can't get my Florida board to come here and make sure that you have both states or all your states listed here. And then when you go to libraries, this is an important step. You will automatically have the eXp libraries, the eXp Illinois and the eXp USA. But what you won't have is your Illinois libraries. So you can add IAR if you're in the Quad Cities. You're just going to use the Quad Cities because I know they're not IAR members. But in all of those documents that everyone else is using from the IAR, you'll find in your Quad Cities library. But for everybody else, you're going to add IAR, the Illinois Association of Realtors. And then if your local board participates, you will add them as well. I have IAR, I have Main Street, and I have Fox Valley. Some of the boards let you add them even if you're not a member. Cyber is one, I believe. I can add Cyber. It doesn't restrict me from doing so. And that may just be a glitch. But Chicago will not let me because I'm not a member. So you can see how you just add a library. See, it tells me I don't have access to Chicago. I'm going to go down, I'm going to remove Cyber because it actually doesn't help if you have too many libraries. When you're doing a search for documents, it's just too many and you might grab the wrong one. So that's how you add a library so that you have access to those forms from within Skyslope Forms because you need that. Okay. So even if you are not going to subscribe to DigiSign, because DigiSign, which gives you Skyslope Forms, is about $64.99 a year, I believe. That is what I paid somewhat recently. So that is still cheaper than DocuSign or .loop for their monthly charge. But if you do have access to an e-signing platform, maybe through your local board membership, you do not have to subscribe to DigiSign. It is not required. And you can come to Skyslope Forms and still get documents from our libraries if you are not a subscriber to DigiSign. But what you cannot do is send them for signature if you are not a subscriber. All you can do is come get your documents. And they're not fillable. If you come to your library to get documents, let's say you want to come on here and get your eXp docs, they're not fillable if you download them from here. Okay. So just be aware of that. So you can come to Browse Libraries and you can come here and you can filter by one of the libraries. For instance, you can come and I could say eXp Illinois and eXp USA, and I can look at all of my eXp docs. You'll see the ABA and the wiring fraud is out here. Our W-9 is here. We've got our exclusive authorization of right to sell. We've got our Illinois agency disclosure and addendum. So direct comp from seller happens to be in the eXp USA. So that's one of the reasons why I always check both eXp libraries when I'm going to search for eXp docs. But so all of those things that we tell you about, the commission reduction requests, the buyer agreements, they're all out here in the eXp libraries. You can just open one of them and download it, okay? But it won't be a fillable doc when you do so. You can also come out and find your IAR docs. But if you're using DigiSign to actually fill and send documents, we also have templates. Because when you're going to create a file in Skyslope Files, the templates are groups of documents. And Steve alluded to them in our team meeting. We have these brokerage templates. We've got Illinois listing template and Illinois buyer template. And you see the listing template has 8 forms and the buyer template has 4 forms. All that is a group of documents that is a time saver for you. You'll create a listing file and you'll just apply the template and it will automatically drop these 8 forms in there. And I'll show you what they are. And same thing with the buyer template. It's the buyer agreement, the Illinois agency disclosure and addendum, ABA, and wiring fraud. What you can't do is open these templates here and start filling out documents. It'll seem like you can, okay? I open this template and look at their fillable forms. I can start typing things, but I can't save it, screenshot it, anything. So these templates are just a place for you to grab and add them in bulk to your file. You cannot use these templates to fill out documents. I'll show you the way that they're meant to be used, okay? So, and you can create your own template. If you say, you know, this one's fine, but I prefer this other document instead, you can create your own template with groups of documents that then can be added to a file you create. Okay, so we're going to start by creating a listing file, and I'm going to show you how that works. So you start by clicking create, and there's a better use for it, and it's more, it changes your workflow and is more helpful on the list side because of all the disclosures that you're sending to your seller. It's something I want to demonstrate the seller side because there's just more to it with the disclosures. So you choose seller because it's going to map signatures and initials onto the documents in their appropriate spot. That's why it has to know whether it's a seller or a buyer. So if you have a client that's going to be both, you're probably going to need to add them. They're going to have a buy file and a seller file, even if they're buying and selling multiple properties, because that's where it's going to put them on the forms, if that makes sense. So if you have the same client in multiple roles, they're going to have a different Skyslope file for whether they're the seller or the buyer. So we're going to start with a seller file. One thing Skyslope Forms has is the ability to check that the client is a company, trust, or other entity. And what that does is it allows you to enter their LLC here, but then also enter their name here, okay? And the reason that's such a great advancement is because it will put ABC Properties as the seller's name, all the places it should, but the signature itself will be John Smith, which is so helpful because if any of you have run into this, if you can only put the seller's name and it's ABC Properties, that's how it's going to assign their signature. And if they sign ABC Properties in an e-signing platform, that's not a valid signature. It needs to be ABC Properties, John Smith, President, something like that, or just John Smith. So by checking this box and entering both of these, it will put ABC Properties everywhere as the seller's name, but the signature will be John Smith and the initials will be JS. So that's enormously helpful, okay? If I take that off, I can just put John Smith, john@smith.com, and then I can add an additional one, and I can put Jane Smith at smith.com. Now, these are important. You're not just putting in random info here because this is how it's going to send their e-signing links. Okay, so you want to take a little care with how you fill this part out. It's not like in Skyslope Forms or in Skyslope itself where maybe people, kind of fudge the names a little bit. This is actually how the docs are going to be templated. So you want to do this correctly. If there's 2 clients, you need both their names or they're not going to have 2 signatures on the docs. Okay. Is there a property yet? I do not recommend importing MLS data. It doesn't import all that much to be helpful, but it does import sometimes bad contact information. So I do not recommend importing MLS data. I have tested it a few different ways and I don't find it helpful. If anything, it creates issues. So I would just enter the property address. I'm going to make up an address, so it's not going to come up, but it would do the Google thing where it helps you. It helps you find the address if it exists. Okay. How would you like to name the file? I always do address. On buyers, sometimes I do primary client though, because I don't have an address yet, whatever. And then it says, would you like to start with one of your templates? And so I can say listing template. If I select this, it's going to add those 8 forms automatically into my file. Because as soon as, if I didn't do that, it would still bring me to this place. So now I have a file, and it's by the address for my sellers. And in my forms tab, this would be blank. Okay, there'd be nothing in here yet if I hadn't selected that template. And if you get to this point, you're like, oh, wait a second, I meant to use a template. You can just go up here and do it here. Click apply template, pick your template, and it's going to add those forms. Now, if you don't want to use my template, if you're like, that's not the docs I use, whatever, or it's just, it's a different situation, you don't have to use a template. You can come out here and you can pick your forms one at a time. Okay. You can go to the, Main Street Organization of Realtors, type in the word exclusive, and find the exclusive right to sell, or the exclusive right to lease, whatever you need. You can add them one at a time. Okay. And you just, all you do is click add. And now it's in my form. Now I've got that one down here. Okay. So you can add documents that way. If you have already filled out a form, if you're on the buy side and you're just uploading things you have already completed or have been sent to you, like the property disclosures, if you're on the buy side, you can upload a document here. It just won't be a fillable form. So if there's a document you need to upload to send for signature, you can do that right here. It just won't be, these are fillable docs right now. You can upload other things. They just won't be, you won't be able to fill anything out on them without adding like text boxes and things like that. So now we've got our sellers, all the documents the seller needs. The listing agreement, the eXp listing agreement requires the use of the Illinois agency disclosure and addendum, but now they're already there for me. So it's not really it's still less pages than most of the other listing agreements. But if you use the template, it's not so aggravating that you have multiple documents. You've got the disclosure and consent to dual agency. You don't have to use it, but it's here now if you need it. The ABA wire fraud, and then the 3 property disclosures are all here. So I can click select all because I'm going to send them all. I'm going to uncheck that extra listing agreement that I added. And then I'm going to click fill and send. So I can come over here. I can see 8 forms are selected and I can see them all right here. So throughout the lifeline of your deal, you're going to, end up with more documents out here because, someone maybe circulated an addendum, a price change addendum. So you would have just that one document here, and maybe that would be the only form you'd be selecting to send. But all of these, they'll never leave. They'll stay here unless you delete them. Okay. So I can click fill and send now. Now, so this is the part that doesn't exist in DigiSign. This is where we're actually filling out our listing agreement. Okay. I can put dates. See, it's cutting me off from the OK button because of the screen sharing, but you get the idea. Okay. I can fill out my listing agreement here. And once I'm done filling out all my documents, we move on. But the Illinois agency disclosure and addendum, because this is only for use in Illinois, there are certain things that are not quite as templated, and this is one of them. Your name should be here as designated agent because it's an agency disclosure, so you do need to add that. But this is not where you add signatures and initials. This is the completion of the documents. And don't worry about the disclosures. Those are going to be sent for the seller to fill out when they sign. Okay, so it's even telling you that this field is required to be filled by the seller. So you can't fill out their disclosures for them. So once you've completed, it's really the listing agreement you'd be filling out at this point. And you can see that it's already mapping that. You can see how it's mapping the signature, the address, in for on your disclosures. So once you've filled out your listing agreement, you'd click prepare signature. Now we have our recipients here, and it's got John and Jane and you as the agent. Okay, needs to sign. You can change it to no action or just receives a copy, sort of like they're getting CC'd on the whole thing. If there's nothing for you to sign, for instance, if you're just circulating an addendum, you could change yourself to no action. And then you click next. We don't add Steve. Steve does not need to be added as a constant member of the file. where everything you sent, he would get copied on. We don't need that. Okay. Only add him on the files where he needs to sign something. And I'll show you how to do that. So now you see it says we're in DigiSign because now we are through all of the extra add-on Skyslope Forms features. And now we're just in the part that we already have, the sending for signatures, the e-signing platform. So this looks exactly like DigiSign does now. So over here, you've got your list of documents, and then we've got our recipients. This is where we would add Steve, because just for this folder of docs, we are going to have Steve sign things. So I'm going to add Steve Rettig, no N, and we're going to use il.sign, exprealty.net for him. And then I'm going to click save. So now we've got all of our signers over here. Now, for those of you that like to assign fields to your seller, like let's say you're sending a buyer agreement, and rather than entering the buyer's name on the document, you use a text field that's not going to be completed until the buyer has signed it. So when we open it to sign, if we get there before the buyer, it looks blank because you have assigned fields to the buyer, and any field assigned to the buyer, whether it's a full name stamp, a text field, a date, a signature, will appear blank to us if we open it first. So what you could do is you could add Steve down, whoops, no, that's not what I meant to do. Add a signer group, and I could add Steve as signing second. So we won't even come to him until your clients have already gotten it. That way, if there's any fields that were assigned to them that are required, like price and dates and things like that, will be completed before it goes to Steve, because we can't sign a listing agreement if the price, the compensation, the dates aren't in there. So if those are fields you have assigned to your client, just make sure that Steve's getting it second so that it's a completed doc when he gets it. And it's super easy to do. You can even add a signer group and do third. Okay. If you want it to go to you first and then your clients and then Steve, you can do that. But then I'm going to click save. Okay. So it's not going to go to Steve if the sellers don't sign. So, and now you've got all the part where the initials and signatures get added. eXp and Skyslope have worked together to template these documents by mapping signatures and initials into what somebody determined were the appropriate places. So just because they're here doesn't mean they need to stay here. You can still add more and delete ones you don't like. So for this particular listing agreement, we would have entered compensation here, and then unrepresented buyer compensation here, and then we'd have the sellers sign off on, initial that, okay? And then at the very bottom of the listing agreement, there would be signatures, okay? On all of our listing agreements, though, Skyslope has templated agent signatures on the listing agreements, because in many states, that's completely legit. In the state of Illinois, if it's an exclusive agreement, the managing broker really is supposed to sign it. So in this case, we don't have to get rid of our signature, just add Steve's in there somewhere. We see plenty of agents doing this where they just pop it right in on top. You could, make them smaller. I've seen people doing this. You make the signature a lot smaller and then make Steve's a lot smaller. You can do that. Don't worry about putting his name in there, but if you want to, you certainly can. You can just put it in right on top of your own. So just add Steve's signature. If it's a listing agreement or a buyer agreement that says that has a compensation section in it, Steve should sign it. Okay. And it's never going to be changed that I know of where Steve's signature will be mapped to anything, because it is very state specific. So that's not going to happen. And then here on this Illinois agency disclosure and addendum, which is required if you use the eXp listing agreement, you also have to add signatures. It's not mapped for us because this is only an Illinois document. So we're lucky we got it added to Skyslope Forms. So we've got Steve's. I would have the sellers. You get the idea. I would add both sellers, and don't worry about everything else. But anyway, so that's how that works. And then the ABA used to be managers, and I have a ticket in to fix this. As of right now, you actually have to add the signatures to the ABA, but you shouldn't have to. And I'm hoping that's fixed very, very soon. So the wiring fraud is mapped. Like I said, the ABA used to be, I don't know what happened. The disclosure, the property disclosure, you just have to add a date stamp right on here on page 1. Otherwise, it's completely templated, okay? The seller, so whoever is seller 1, will be filling this out when they open it to sign. It's sort of smart. It won't let them check more than one box for each question, and it does prompt them, I think, if they skipped one. What it doesn't do is if they check no here for like not having occupied the property, it doesn't make them explain. If they answer yes in NA, it's not going to make them explain here. So you still do have to explain to them their obligation to disclose and how that works. But it definitely has the space for them to do that. And then it has all the signatures for the sellers. This is why, you know, it matters that you have set up their file, that they're the sellers. Otherwise, this wouldn't be here. But you can add signatures and initials just like in regular DigiSign, okay? And then you see the radon is completely templated. Now, the problem with the radon is these are optional initials, but they're in all 4 spots. So you have to decide, am I going to explain this very well to my seller so that they know they should only be initialing in 2, otherwise they contradict themselves? Or am I going to ask them which ones they would have signed, and I'm going to get rid of, I'm going to delete the ones that they are not, that they shouldn't initial because they'd contradict themselves. So you can choose how to do that because they are optional. Your seller could, if they're really smart and if they understand it, they can initial only 2 of the 4. But what we typically see, if you don't do what I just did, is that they initial all 4. And if they contradict themselves completely, they don't enjoy the benefits of the protection from this disclosure. Because if they've initialed all 4, you know, the buyer can come back later and say, look what they did, this, and the disclosure then wouldn't protect them. So, try to do that. It'll get rejected at our end if your seller has initialed all 4 spots. The lead paint's better because the way it's laid out is better. So that's not a problem. And then you just send just the way you always would in any e-signing platform. You can format your email here. That's going to go out with that. And it'll ask you, do you want to sign now? And you can see, I recommend that you create a practice file where you use your own email as a seller and send yourself these documents so that you can see what it's like to fill out the disclosures from the seller's point of view. I should have just clicked start. There is, I already have pre-approved my signature, unfortunately, so we don't get to see what that looks like. But when somebody goes in to accept their signature, they get to choose their font. They can also correct their signature. So, that works the same as DigiSign always has. And that's how that works. So, now I'm back in my file. So all those forms are in the Forms tab. Envelopes will be every envelope that you send for signature, signed docs, and file details. File details is all the stuff that you filled out in the first place, and you can come out here and fix it. So in our envelopes, you see that 1 person out of 4 has signed because the 2 sellers and Steve have not. I can come out here, I can correct an envelope. I can resend if someone says they didn't get it. There's, a lot of things you can do. I'm going to cancel it since it's not real. But once all the documents have been signed, all 4 people have signed it, you can go to Sign Docs and there'll be a list here. And the nice thing is it'll be 8 separate PDFs. Each doc is signed separate. You can download them together if you want, but what's nice is you can upload them separately to Skyslope. You can send just the docs you need to the lender or to the other agent or whatever. You're not going to have that one bulk doc. You're not stuck with that one bulk doc. So it allows you to upload things easier to Skyslope too. So that you'll have 8 separate PDFs instead of 1, if that helps you. And then, and that's how Skyslope Forms works. I do caution you, if you're going to use it on the buy side, the multi-board 7.0 contract is in both the Main Street and the RAFE libraries for sure. It's probably in cars too. I don't have access. But I do not like how they templated it. They made it all optional initials, but they did drop buyer initials into every possible spot, including waiver of professional inspections, post-closing possession, as is, home sale contingency. They're all optional, but that's not how I would want to send a document to a buyer. If you're going to use it, you need to go in and remove initials from a lot of places. They have them in all 3 financing options. So you'd have to have a pretty savvy buyer to know which ones they wanted to initial. So I recommend still completing your 7.0 contract in MRED and uploading it. I have a buyer template that just has the buyer agency, the wiring fraud, and the ABA. So you can just upload the contract, upload the disclosures, and send it for signature from your buyer file. And you're already going to have a buyer agreement, right? You're not supposed to open a door without a buyer agreement. So you're unlikely to be writing a contract and a buyer agreement at the same time. So it's on the buy side, you're more likely to be uploading documents that have been sent to you or created somewhere else. And then your buyer template can just be the wiring fraud and ABA, things like that. So it is more noticeable, the benefits of Skyslope Forms, I think, on the seller side because of the disclosures being completed online. But once you get used to Skyslope Forms, when I first started using it, if I had something real fast I wanted to do, I still used DigiSign because I didn't want to deal with forms. But once you're in the middle of a deal and someone sends you one thing, you can add it to Skyslope Forms and send it just as quickly because you already have your file set with your clients in it and stuff like that. So, okay, thank you for coming. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to come see me on the floor. You can send me a direct workplace chat. You can email il.broker. You can come in and on the pull a ticket, check I have a question on the Illinois broker floor.